What is going on, people? Welcome to yet another episode of Unfiltered coming your way right here, right now. This will officially go down as episode number 310 in your scorecard. You could jump on board 24/7, 365. It is easy. Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. You could follow me on Twitter, X, if you will, at Casey Stern. Jump up into the bio, and there you could follow through and get all our content on the YouTube channel at Unfiltered with Casey Stern. There you'll have not only episodes of Unfiltered, episodes of Believe in Mets. The second one just came out yesterday, as I do this here on a Monday on the 8th of July. And the new pod, which will debut this afternoon, NBA Coast to Coast, weekly as well. You can get all of that on the video side and that content, Unfiltered with Casey Stern on YouTube. And of course, we're on Instagram as well. Get on board, give us a follow, and like and subscribe everywhere that you can get your better podcast today. Want to get into the announcement last night of the All-Star reserves, talk about some of them, get into the snubs and all of that sort of stuff. You have comments on that, want to hear from you, get to me along the way, send me a DM, give me comments in any of the videos on any of the platforms, and we'll get to you there and respond. Also want to dabble and touch a little bit NBA on Summer League with Bronny and get into Diaz, Masvidal as well, if you happen to watch that, assuming your fan meal worked, and we'll get into all of that if you're a UFC and an MMA fan. In the meantime, whether it's UFC, MMA, boxing, any kind of baseball, golf, soccer, you name it, BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. They got every stat, every matchup, every live odd and spread, all while the games are being played. Then when it's over, it's easy to get over to the online casino. You got blackjack and poker, and you can unwind with over 150 slot games. So head over to the website today, get in on the action, use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, get a 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. It is BetOnline. The game starts here, and I'll start here with a little bit of a PSA, if you will, for a lot of baseball fans who are going nuts. Every year, there are going to be snubs for the Major League Baseball All-Star game, but those snubs do not matter. You know why? Because by the time you get to the All-Star game, with all the injuries and pitchers that don't start and teams that don't want players going and all of the different things that take place behind the scenes, by the time you get to the game, most of your snubs are in. So if you're a Met fan worried about Nimmo, worried about Lindor, both those guys probably get in. You've got injuries all over the map, the Tatises and the Betts and others. But why are we here? Well, we're here because of the same reason we've always been here with snubs initially, even though the rosters now are large enough it won't matter, and that is that you've got one per team. So I got to have, if you're a Nationals, a C.J. Abrams or a De La Cruz in Cincinnati, and every year there are these instances where your player can't get in because that position is already taken up by somebody who has to get in. But fear not. Enough players will get in through injuries and other ways over the next week or so, and you will be fine. Take a deep breath. So all will be okay. But yeah, there are snubs. There's always snubs. And look, this is good conversation and good fodder. At the same time, if you're being fair and you look at other sports, you look at the NBA, and you've got so few players that get in that are on a roster, and obviously the roster's a lot smaller, that there are a lot of fans who sit there and say, my guy deserved to be an all-star, and they don't get it. And in baseball, you don't have to worry about that because it is so watered down. And it's been that way for a long, long period of time. Regardless of all of that, you got 32 first-time all-stars, and there are some prominent names in that mix, including at the top of that, Paul Skeens, who is the first of a first. What do I mean by that? He's the first time we've ever seen a first overall pick, then in his first season, get to an all-star game. And a guy who, to me, everybody, look, I get it. You went to Zach Wheeler or whoever, and I haven't, to be honest with you, really paid much attention right now to who's online to start and who's going to be making starts a couple of days before so they can't go and all those sorts of things because I got better things to do. But this is a celebration of moments and spotlights. The All-Star game, the All-Star festivities, should always be that way. And if that's the case, that's the guy I want starting the game. That's the guy I want to see up against the lineup of the American League in that first inning, and let's go. Give me all that, inject that into my veins because of the moment and because of what it is. Is that going to happen? I don't know. But look, call me a Pittsburgh fan in this case then, because that's what I want to see. meritocracy being what it is, although Skeen's been one of the best pitchers in baseball since he stepped on the mound this season. That's why he's an all-star. It certainly is deserved, not alone in terms of the rookies. How about Jackson Merrill of the Padres, one of 5 Padres to be named an all-star? Obviously, Tatis being one of those who's injured, probably not going to play. But how about Merrill, who gets in as a rookie? So a lot of younger players, but also a lot of first-timers that are there because there were a lot of guys who were either also-rans or were never going to be's. Like, how about Seth Lugo, who's had an unbelievable season, a Cy Young contender in the American League? Whether you're a Met fan that's watching or listening to this because you are following me because of our Metdom or whatever the case is, if you followed Seth Lugo, you're sitting there wondering, is he really a starter at the major league level? You're not wondering, is he an all-star starter at the major league level, or is he a Cy Young candidate? And he'd been all of that for the Kansas City Royals. So congrats to Seth Lugo. And those kind of stories are mixed into those 32 players that are those first timers. I love that. You got a lot of other guys that I think you'll have put together first halves that we didn't see coming. Marcell Ozuna, regardless of what you think of the guy personally, and we all have our thoughts. Believe me, I've got mine. But this is a guy who really has carried the Atlanta Braves offensively for the first half of the season. And especially when you talk about not having Acuna, and especially when you're talking about, losing Strider even before that, and the importance that was placed then on the offense. Did Chris Sale fit your list of guys you thought would be an all-star? Speaking of guys who we thought were, look, he not a never was. He was a was, but was in the has-been. Well, I don't know. Maybe it'll work out. Maybe it's a little bit of bang for your buck, right? If you're sitting there and you're Alex Anthopoulos and you make this move for Chris Sale, they didn't think he was going to have to lead the staff, number one. And they certainly didn't think he'd be one of the leaders in the major leagues. I think he leads the league in wins, regardless of what you think of that. But when you look at the way he's performed across the board, he's been terrific and fits that category. The Phillies in the National League East get 7 players to lead everybody across the board in all 30 teams. They add 4 pitchers: Wheeler, Suarez, Matt Strom, Jeff Hoffman, all get in. Philadelphia Phillies have had an amazing first half of the season. They've been bell-to-bell the best team in the game, and they are taking things up a number of notches from where they were the last couple of years, where they were a team that kind of you thought was better than they looked on the record, wins and losses, hung around, eventually got into the postseason, and then made their push once they got through October. No mas. Now Philadelphia is sitting there in a spot where they'll be as aggressive at the deadline, and we'll get into that here on this show plenty over the next 2 or 3 weeks. But now sitting there with 7 all-stars on the team. The Guardians put 5 in the game, adding the Nailers and David Fry, who's been fantastic. And obviously we know about Kwan, and you think about what they have done. By the way, how aggressive will they get at the deadline now? Nobody expected Stephen Vogt and company to be here, especially, we mentioned Strider with the Braves, not having Shane Bieber on this team. And even with that, no one thought this team was a factor, but nobody knew that division would be the factor it's been with the Guardians, with the Twins, and with the Kansas City Royals. So a lot of different all-star stories. I'm curious, what is your favorite all-star story of the first half? Let me know. Get me on Twitter at Casey Stern, or hit me up on the YouTube comments. Once you get over there, like and subscribe the video and get all the content. Let me know what's your favorite all-star story, whether it's somebody that you root for on your team, that's on your fantasy team, whomever it might be. I want to know. Let's go from the highest of the highs and all-stars, and let's go to the lowest and the lows of what I will call the weak WEAK of the weak WEEK. And that's Colton Brewer. You may not know who that is unless you're deep diving in Major League Baseball, but he's a reliever for the Chicago Cubs, who will now be out a long while because after a bad outing, when he got taken out of a game after only facing a couple of hitters, he went and he punched the dugout wall and broke his left hand. I have seen this happen. I go back to the Kevin Brown scenario many, many years ago. We've seen this so many times, and I really have never understood this. Now, in playing sports and also getting crazy watching sports, I understand, and I'll be fair. I mean, look, I did it on TV, but I'll drop an F-bomb. I'll scream an expletive. When Kenny Rogers walked Andrew Jones to end the season for the Mets in 1999, I have long talked about over the years, which is a true story, that I took my television, threw it down on the ground, and it broke. That's probably like my moment. But if everything that I was based on pitching and based on being an athlete and being on the field. And I've got to understand there are those hero zero moments, right? Where you're going to have, success. You're going to have all kinds of failure. You got to find a way. There are helmets in the dugout to throw. There are bats to swing, not at people, but go down there in the hallway and you got plenty of money to pay for it. You go ahead and you disrupt something. Go swing it at a wall over there. Put a hole in the bathroom door that's in there right when you make that turn when you get past the dugout. To sit there and punch a wall, you're an idiot. I mean, how moronic to do that, I never understand. So there you go, the weak WEAK or the weak WEEK for Colton Brewer of the Cubs. Now, a lot of people thought that the Diaz-Masvidal fight would be weaker than it was. Now, I'd love to tell you that I saw all of it. I didn't, because I ordered it on Fanmio. And if you're sitting there and you're a diehard UFC or an MMA fan and you tried to order this pay-per-view and you went the Fanmio route, which Mio and Uo, no one had ever heard of before this, let's be fair, then it stalled out on you, it backed out on you, it froze on you. I had to actually go back on demand to go watch then the first few rounds because I had missed like the first 4 because it was stuck on my screen because that server never had so many people watching at the same time. But in watching this fight, it was way better than I thought it was going to be. I mean, Diaz looked, I love Nate, right? And I'm a diehard UFC guy, diehard. Love Nate. He was a mess against Jake Paul. It was terrible. He looked terrible. He's always been pitter-pat in the way he boxes. Obviously not a lot behind his punches. We understand that. He's sitting there with volume, right? It is, quantity over quality, if you will. But he looked terrible against Jake Paul. He looked like, as he said afterwards and admitted, and I don't know if that's an excuse because of the way he performed, or if it's true, that basically he didn't train and didn't take it very seriously. And he should have, which is now why he's calling out Jake Paul, I think, to try and get that thing again, in addition to the fact that he wants the money, although he's turned down $15 million, reportedly, according to Jake Paul and his camp, to go fight him in the PFL and MMA, which is Nate's world, because Nate wants to go ahead and promote it, and because Nate is still involved in the UFC, so it's hard for him to do that. All those intricacies aside, this fight was way better than I thought. Now, I thought it was way closer. I'm curious for people in the comments, let me know, because I thought the cards were bizarre. Anybody throwing up a 98-92 on this card is crazy. I actually think 97-93 is too extreme as well. I had Diaz maybe 96-94, but it was close. I could have seen Masvidal. I think he, again, this is, and I'm more of a UFC guy than a boxing guy. I was a boxing fan big time as a kid, but then it died out, and so did I with it. But if you're looking at, the volume, they both threw a lot of volume. They both didn't land necessarily as much as they should, but we know they're not conventional boxers. We get it. Masvidal threw the harder shots, but I think what ended up changing the tide of this fight were the last 2 rounds, because I think there were very few rounds that were clear on this card. If you watch this fight, 9 and 10 were 2 of them. Both seemed to go to Diaz. That would have made the difference for me if there was even Steven going up to that. Curious what you thought, but it was a better fight than I thought it would be. And in the world of like these crossovers and MMA fights and UFC guys, going over to boxing, look, Woodley Paul won was okay, I guess. But, you want to go back to the Anderson Silva Chavez, junior fight, whatever you kind of want to throw in there. But this was way better than I thought it was going to be. I'm curious if you watched it, what your thought was. A lot of people are watching Summer League, and in covering and doing Summer League for 3 years with Turner and doing play-by-play there for a couple of years and being down there on the sidelines. And those were crazy fun days where you're doing like back-to-back-to-back games. And I got to do them shout out with my guy, GA Greg Anthony, over those years. But you sit there and you do those games and you see how those, that Cox Pavilion, and I can't remember the name of the other one, those 2 places, how they change environments based on stories. I remember, for example, going back, and it was the Lakers, the year that Lonzo Ball was there, and it was a big deal. I mean, obviously his parents, his dad, and everything with the family in attendance, but then you had, everybody from around the media who was coming in to watch. I remember the first time that I can't remember who it was to, that he delivered some kind of pass for like an alley-oop, and people were talking about it for the rest of the night because it's Summer League, and this is not really a high level of play, and it's not about that. It's really kind of a shrug, rub shoulders, and hubbub with people who are in the environment and do fun interviews and get a chance to, enjoy, if you will, the extended heat in Vegas, which it is at this time of year. It is crazy. I always laugh. You walk outside one of those arenas to go back to the casino, wherever the heck you're staying, and it's unbelievable. I got friends who live there. I can't understand it, but I get it, right? But for Bronny James to bring the attention that he's bringing now, it's good for the sport. And regardless of what you think, and I talked about this in a previous pod, which you can get in detail, but regardless of the fact that, yeah, he's on the team and was drafted because his dad's LeBron, regardless of the fact that there's a lack of sincerity and authenticity and honesty about the way the Lakers and everybody have handled this, because they seem to want to like force feed to you and to me that it's not about that, when we all know that it's about that. It is great for the game, the attention that it gets. It's great for Summer League, albeit what with 4 points, which I laugh. It's not a lot, but just under his average of 4.8 in his career at UFC or USC. Sorry, I had the UFC on the brain. Either way, you can see more of Unfiltered. Get to Unfiltered with Casey Stern on YouTube. Jump in Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe and get on board the new pod, which will debut this afternoon here as I do this on a Monday, NBA Coast to Coast. Get Believe in Mets. Episode 2 is out. Episode 3 is coming up Wednesday. My guest on Believe in Mets for episode 3 will be my good friend, a longtime friend, the bench coach of your New York Metropolitans, John Gibbons. You can get all that content right here, courtesy of our good friend